Let's talk for and about the LGBT communities around the world. I'm Michael Ross, and this is Straight Friendly. In this episode, we are going to talk about a very important subject, which is very close to my heart. In this episode, we will be talking with and about transgender people. Transgender people have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. Being transgender is not necessarily have anything to do with sexual orientation, because transgender people may identify as heterosexual, straight, homosexual, gay or lesbian, bisexual, asexual, or actually can decide not to label their sexual orientation at all. Now, usually, if we hear any news or find any content about transgender people, we might be confronted with some bad news, Cases of violence against trans people, unemployment for instance. Unfortunately, in some places, the whole process of coming out as a transgender can be really difficult or even really dangerous. Among the different identities and groups of the LGBT people, transgender people, either male, female, or non-binary, are facing a lot of discrimination. Not only in the heteronormative sphere, meaning in the straight society, but also within the LGBT community itself. Take for example the American activist Sylvia Rivera.
I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation.
As an Israeli, I will never forget the day when in 1998, while I was in primary school, Dana International, a transgender female singer from Israel, has won the Eurovision Song Contest. She brought so much pride to so many people, with a really good song by the way, the song which called Diva. I loved this song. And probably all of you know at least one transgender figure that can make you feel pride, that can empower you. A brave person. Now, I believe in creating empowering content. A content that can connect us all. And this is why I chose that the first episode, which we will have about transgender people on the Straight Friendly podcast, will be an empowering one. Instead of talking about discrimination and the work sphere, we have decided to have our first talk with the story of Bianca Luis. Bianca, who is a transgender woman, has got to a very senior position in the tech industry in Israel. She is also a board member of the LGBTech organization, which has branches in many countries around the world. Before we continue to our guest for this episode, I would like to note that the production of this episode came to reality thanks to the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Jerusalem. This episode has been recorded in collaboration with LGBTech Israel, together with its chairperson, Mr. Shachar Grembek. So today we have two special guests with us. The first one is a father of two, and he's the partner of Roy. He's the founder and the manager of the LGBTech organization, and he's also the co-founder and the CTO, which is Chief of Technology Officer, right? Of a startup called Reps AI. So hello, Shachar Grembek.
Hello, Michael.
Nice to meet you here. Our other special guest, she's the head of sales at Opster, and she was the formerly vice president and leader of successful startups in Israel, such as Logs.io. So we have with us Bianca Luis. Hello.
Hi, Michael. And can I just say what a great honor it is to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for both of you. Actually, this is the first time that I'm recording more than one person at once. So thank you also for sharing the mic and holding it here. But I think we're gonna have a very interesting episode. And one of the things which is connected between both of you is the fact that you're both members, and Shachar, you're also the founder and the manager. So you're both in the board of the LGBTech organization, right? So can you please tell us a bit about what you do, in what countries you're doing, your activities, and what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. So LGBTech is an organization that promotes diversity and inclusion for LGBTs in the workforce. We work both with employers to help them understand how to promote an inclusive work environment for LGBTs. We also encourage the LGBT community to be themselves at the workplace. We have both a list of 30 top LGBT executives. We have a list of 30 top executives, and we do that in order to increase visibility for LGBT executives at the workplace. And we also have events that we invite role models from around the world. We had Lord Brown, who is the former CEO of BP, British Petroleum, Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Vivian Ming, who is an AI scientist that is exceptional around the world. And so we also have a few chapters abroad, both in France and also in Netherlands. Cooperate with other LGBT organizations that do the same and focus on both tech and workplaces around the world. And we cooperate with them in order to promote our cause, because we share values.
And what made you to form this organization? Did it come from your personal experience, or?
So the reason I founded it was that I myself experienced discrimination in the workplace. I mean, when I came out of the closet, I felt as that my workplace doesn't know how to digest.
So in which year did it happen?
So I came out of the closet 2008, and I founded LGBTech at January 2011. And I did it because I felt that there is a lot to promote regarding how workplaces help LGBTs feel comfortable at the workplace.
And in what way have you been discriminated at your workplace?
So when I came out of the closet, when I shared it with my HR manager, so she didn't know how to react. I mean, her first reaction was to laugh. She was a little bit embarrassed and she didn't know how to react. And so from that moment, I understood that there is a lot of workplaces don't know how to handle what to do with LGBT employees. So I talked with some friends, and I saw that there is no organization that does promote it in Israel. So I decided to found the organization. And as I said, it promotes both, works both with employers and with the LGBT community, and with other diversity inclusion organizations that, unfortunately, in Israel, LGBT is not always considered as part of diversity, unfortunately.
Bianca, did you join to the organization for the same reason? Or what made you join?
No, I definitely did not have the same HR manager as Shachar.
Lucky you.
So, yeah. Okay. The truth is, I think everybody as individuals, part of our community and part of the general community in the world, have got different reasons for joining their organizations and their own journeys. And I doubt two people have got the same reason, even though there are commonalities. There are things that we share in common. Obviously, my story is different from Shachar's, but no more traumatic and no less traumatic. Just different.
If I also may add that you're identifying yourself as a transgender woman?
Oh, my word. How I hate labels. Yeah. Okay, let's go with that.
Okay. But definitely you had some story of being open in your workplace.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But it's very, very different from Shachar's story. My openness actually came from Shachar, believe it or not. Not from an HR person that laughed at me. How can I put it?
So basically, you're one of the people who might have been already affected by the organization that Shachar formed?
Okay, so I had a lot of things which I admired in what Shachar was doing for the community. But my story didn't really start with them. My story started when I transitioned many years ago, long before I actually joined LGBTech. I had my own discrimination, my own challenges, and I'll give you an example. I transitioned on the job. So there's a funny story. So if your listeners want to hear, my first day as Bianca in the workplace was quite funny. The process of transitioning from male to female, which was my journey at the time, you got to get a psychologist who assesses you to be stable. Let's not go into the details, but the point is, one of the exercises, you had to go dressed as your appropriate gender identity. So that was the first time in my life that I was dressed as a woman. Okay, it wasn't a pretty sight. I can assure you that is a good thing that there were no video cameras there. And then I got an urgent call from my boss in Jerusalem, in an office, who said, who knew about the story? I was very open about it. He said, come in quickly. We got an emergency of work. And I said, well, I'll be as you've never seen me before. Anyway, I went in. And after I was in for the day, I thought, well, I'm not going to go back. It's like everybody knows about it. Everybody's seen me. So from now on, I'm just Bianca. So it was a very accidental tripping over myself experience. And coming home that night, I got stopped in a police roadblock, who asked for my driver's license. And there was a little bit of discrimination there because they couldn't figure out why my identity didn't match the person driving the car. And I was stuck there for a long time.
Wow.
That was pretty terrifying. So my discrimination actually started the very day that I transitioned, ironically. But as it went on, it was a lot of fun on that job because everybody accepted it. But the discriminations continued in the world. When the company got bought, which was great, I had to get another job, and I went for a few interviews. And the first interview, I got told, don't be so nervous. What you nervous about? I said, yeah, I don't even know how to live. Never mind interview. This is not easy for me. It wasn't easy to hide who I was at that stage. It was still extremely new for me. So anyway, so that was the beginning. Other companies said, oh, that's been extremely interesting. Thanks for your time. I knew I was relatively a good candidate, but I was never given an in. I was pretty open at that stage. I had my own kind of YouTube channel, and I was idealistic in helping the world and creating awareness, but I wasn't getting a job. I just could not get a job.
And it's not that you became less professional than you were before, but you had more experience than you had in interviews you had years before that. It's just the transition.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, by being yourself, you actually become more productive, more focused, more able to work. However, you get the prejudice that comes with it. So my idealism died. I stopped all public channels. I stopped everything about my past. And I just became me. And there was no public record of it. And I got a job a few weeks later, and I built a career. I built a career out of the public eye, so to speak. And when I met Shachar, I started to think to myself, I'm not in the same place. I'm now have proven that you can take a chance on a trans person, and you can be successful. Even if you didn't know it, you did it. And the journey was Shachar helped me, I guess, in some small way to try and help other people, because before that I was building my journey without acknowledging who I actually was.
Wow, thank you.
Sure.
I think this is just proving also, this is something that we've been talking about in previous episodes that we had also about celebrities. If people who are in some position of impact, should they come outside of the closet or not? Shachar, also, from what you told us before, there are different lists of executive managers who are from the community, and you're actually the only Israeli who've been chosen so far for the top 100 LGBT managers in the world by the Financial Times, right?
Yes.
And so why to participate in such things? Isn't it better maybe to stick with your career and not to find yourself in a position where you have to hide your YouTube channels or parts of the past but the future that you do want them to be part of who you are?
So yeah, it's a good question. And one of the reasons that we produced this list of 30 top LGBT executives in Israel was in order to increase visibility. We have a lot of people that are out in the entertainment business, in many other businesses, communications, but we have less visibility regarding executives out of the closet. And there is a lot of people working in many companies, and there is very little role models. When we first did the list, I talked with the people that we chose for the list, and and some were asking me why we're doing that, why it's so important. And what I said to them is that it's an opportunity to be not just a manager or executive, but to be a leader and to inspire the community that you can be both successful in your career and also be who you are. We had in one of our events Lord Brown, who came to inspire us, and he said...
Who is he, for those who don't know?
Lord Brown, who was the CEO of BP, British Petroleum. It's a big, huge company, corporate, origin from England, but it's a global company. And he said that he's sorry that he didn't came out earlier in his career, and he wasn't himself. He invested a lot of energy hiding who he was. And there are a lot of researchers that provide information about how employees are more efficient or more happy, who retain in their jobs more because they feel comfortable being themselves. So it's both the interest of the employee and the employer that people feel comfortable who they are. And I think that as more we have visibility of role models or executives who are out, we'll have more people that feel comfortable being themselves at work. So this is very important to have those role models out. Not that if someone doesn't feel comfortable, it's okay. We don't have a policy saying everyone needs to be out, but the ones that choose to be out are ones that are not just executives, but as I said, also leaders, role models for others, and this is very important.
And the impact that they might have on other generations of people from the community who might be afraid of being who they are or their families. I think it's also very interesting and important that it will happen also in places which we might not think about the LGBT community. For instance, the case of Bianca, of coming out in Jerusalem, in a company. I mean, Jerusalem, once imagining Jerusalem, the first thing, many of our listeners will not think about a story like that. Bianca, do you feel that, the fact that you've been in Jerusalem, that your story or experience was different? Did you feel any comments from the people who worked with you? Or actually it's even more complicated. It's basically in some way you came inside of the closet in some way, no? Or you went back. So how was the reaction after you got the job? And
yeah, I mean, for all the listeners who are not in Israel, I would say that, if you haven't been to Jerusalem, I suggest it's definitely worth seeing it. It's the most unique place that I think one of the few places in the world that you can say this is different. Not just different architecture, different atmosphere, different dynamic.
Yes, it is. And many people probably cannot imagine that there are also companies outside of the old city and the churches. And
yeah, you can't. You picture it in your mind, but you can feel the atmosphere. You can feel the tension. You can feel the hope. You can feel the despair. You can live it when you go into there. However, in full disclosure, my story of Jerusalem has got nothing to do with that. Because when I said I came out in Jerusalem, I was not living in Jerusalem. I was living in a little city between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem called Rehovot, which, if you translate it into English, means street, and it's basically one big street with lots of people around that street. And the company I worked with was a small startup, which was in an incubator at the Hebrew University in the technology section. And the people who I worked with were incredible friends. My ex-CEO, who was my boss, and I was head of their sales to build the business approach, but he was my mentor, my very first startup mentor. We're still friends today. When my son turned 13 years old and he had what is the Jewish rite of passage into adulthood, which is called the bar mitzvah, and we went to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, which is the bottom of the Temple Mount that is the third most holy site in Islam. The only problem is I had transitioned and I'm a single mom, and he's my little, at that stage, my 13-year-old bouncy baby boy. And in the Western Wall, because of the religious beliefs, women cannot stand the same side as the men. And my ex-boss was not ultra-Orthodox religious, but very observant, a very true believer, straight white male, family man, amazing friend of mine, who took Sean to get his pathway into adulthood and took him to the wall as his father for the bar mitzvah, and he is religious.
Wow.
So I don't think you can judge everybody in any place, because I think they're just incredible people in a mosaic of the world.
It's about the stories of the people and not necessarily about the stigmas that we might have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all got stigmas. I've got stigmas. I see a person, I judge them. I wish I didn't, but I think we all do in some way. But I think part of the journey of all of our lives is being surprised that our own stigmas, our own stereotypes are sometimes absolute nonsense. And it's a refreshing story when people actually show you that, well, what you think is not actually the reality of the situation. And that goes into the point where Shachar said, it's being leaders in our community, because we're being judged for who we are and not for who we are externally, who we present in, but not the people we are inside. Not what we can offer to the world, not what we can offer to our friends. So when a person gets to know us, it changes the picture.
I can definitely feel with you, and someone who also lived in Jerusalem for 4 years, quite many years. So I've been also surprised for several times about being accepted. I studied and worked at the Hebrew University, not in the startup, and I have to say that I also had some really good surprises from colleagues and students who were with me, and religious, and either Jewish or Muslim. But at the same time, also, when I participated in the parade there, the gay LGBT parade there, so there was also the murder of Shira Banki. So I feel like that even once being accepted, we all, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we all can agree about the fact that no matter what, somehow we do face in front of our societies the fact that we are LGBT people. Maybe we are like everyone, but we are also different.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You know, I had a conversation with the vice president or general manager of eBay in New York, and I asked him, like, about this exact question, being part of the LGBT community and what that means. He says we can only stop trying to be accepted when we don't have to come out anymore. You know, I've never heard a straight person saying, I'm coming out, I've got something to tell you, I'm straight. It sounds ridiculous, but until we can reach that stage, we know we're being judged. We know there's a problem. We know there's a challenge. And ironically, after the break, we can go into the trans challenge as well, because I think the trans community is more or less where the gay, lesbian community probably were 20, 30 years ago.
I can add to that one of the things that we see is that one of the things that I believe is that LGBT is part of my identity. What we sometimes see is that some employers say, can you please lower the fact that you're LGBT or disguise the fact that you're LGBT? And something that, from my perspective, is something that is a little bit problematic because the fact that I'm LGBT is also part of my identity. I'm both Israeli, Jewish, father, startup entrepreneur, and also LGBT.
And an LGBT parent.
LGBT parent, all those things are part of my identity. It's not that I'm only LGBT or not only Israeli, but I do expect that the employees accept the fact that I'm all these identities.
So after we had a short break and so many questions that I have after this break. And Bianca, I would like to ask you, first of all, what it's like being trans in the business world.
Michael, that's a short question. I think the answer is a bit longer. Let me try to keep it as short as I can. I don't really know what it's like not to be trans in the business world. So I can give the challenges as well. Shachar said before the break is that it's part of your identity, it's part of who you are. But the first thing that jumps through many people's mind is being gay is about who you sleep with in the bedroom. Being trans is a step behind that. Being trans is the first thing that people ask you, well, have you had the operation? That's not part of the identity. That's not part of who you are. And quite honestly, it's nobody's business anyway. Unless you're in a relationship with somebody, why would that even be relevant? So what's it like being trans in the workplace? I would say largely misunderstood. And there's a massive difference between people that you're open with, because often they are very accepting, but there's not often the real picture that happens behind the back. And I would say being a trans, everything that another person would have to do to advance their career, a trans person would have to do 50 times better if they were open about what they're doing. And it's really as simple as that.
It's like being like another kind of a minority, where you have to really fight for your position and for your place, and if you want to get to better career stages, for instance, or workplaces.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I got to where I am today by not being open. So I got to where I am as a straight woman, which is not easy, but it probably is a lot easier than getting to where I am as an openly trans woman. I can talk in retrospect now that I've arrived, and I can say, well, guys, look what happened. And I had a meeting at some of my investors last week, and we were laughing because one of our new customers have a diversity form. Said, look, now we got diversity. But they didn't know it when I was employed. So it was coincidental. And I look around the industry. I look for role models. I look for other executives. I look for other employees. Do you know how many I see around me in the Israeli executive market and technology market? How many trans role models I can look to?
0, I guess. Or are there any?
Not that I've seen, but we'll carry on looking. And I think that gives the answer to your question.
And you really have to fight for that. You really have to work so hard in order to find such example. I can also say that for the production of this podcast, for instance, when I wanted to talk about the topic of the transgender community, so many of the speakers that I found, they were activists or people who dealt with, let's say, the less empowering sides of the transgender community. And I think that this is something which is so interesting about your story and can be so empowering. And I have 2 questions. Okay. First of all, let's talk about, let's say, outside of Israel. Who are or do you have any role models from the transgender community who are alive today and empower you?
When I think about that question, Michael, I'd say yes and no. There's one or two role models I can think of off the top of my head of trans women that inspired me, but there's nobody I know. So a good example of that is a computer scientist, and if you're listening to the podcast, I encourage you to go and Google a lady called Lynn Conway, who was one of the early employees of IBM, basically programmed the first computers, an amazingly smart woman. And she was in the closet, built a career, much like I did. I'm not putting myself on the same level, but in respect of built a career, and once successful, was outed or came out. She didn't build it through the prejudice. However, she was inspiring and she could do it. If you ask me, well, is anybody who came out openly and built a career as an executive? I don't know anybody. And that's just a very sad truth and a reality. I've seen a few in the entertainment industry. I've seen some in the political arena. Technology executives on executive leaderships. No.
What do you think, friends, is the role of the LGBT community within the tech industry? And I'll say why I'm asking that. In my opinion, our community, which is it's a complex of many communities spread all around the world in different places. And as we all know, one of the ways for people from the community to socialize, and I'm defining myself as queer or gay, more queer. But for me, for instance, one of the socializing tools, let's say, is Grindr, a dating app, which is dedicated for gay people. So, and today we see that at least in the gay community, less people are going out to bars, for instance, and dance clubs, but they are more interacting and meeting people through those dating apps. And they're tremendously affecting the way we meet people, we get to know people, and they were developed by people from the community. And in my opinion, it has also some sides which are not so positive, because if in the past, let's say I would have grown up in New York in the 60s and I could go to Stonewall Inn before the riot, so probably good chances that I would meet people who are not only gay and not only around my height or sexual preferences, but probably I will meet more people, and including trans people. What is the role that we as LGBT persons, what role do we have in the tech industry? Because the tech products and apps, for instance, as Grindr, are affecting the way we are socializing with each other and the way we meet each other. And it has also positive aspects and negative aspects. In my personal opinion, one of the negative aspects of Grindr, for instance, is that I will probably meet only gay people, and in these days people are less going to bars or dance club or places where they can socialize and meet people who are not only the letter that presents them. Tough question.
Yeah, super tough question. So yes, LGBT tech does create a closed community where we can empower companies to empower a specific kind of people and not meet other people. However, your point is important, Michael, about meeting people. It's not the same as a dating app like Grindr or a closed community, because of those empowering a community. I do think that our organization makes a very special effort to translate our messages into the wider community. So we do hold live events, and of course we welcome to the LGBT community, but we very much make a point of interacting between the general public of all kinds to promote that cross-understanding. I think your point's important, but I think it's a point that is covered, of course, during the corona phase, but more challenging because trying to get a wider community to attend a Zoom is much more challenging than going into companies. But I'm going to give it over to Shachar to elaborate because he probably knows a little bit more than I do on this.
Shachar, let us know. What is your opinion?
To add to what Bianca said, we're focused more on the social aspect. We're not a business that are for profit. So what matters for us is that to connect the community with one another, in order to be stronger together. So we do live events in which we connect people from all parts of the LGBT community to meet one another and to cooperate. What we see in many cases that people either do business together. I myself met my co-founder at one of our events. So what we bring to the community is this vibe of connecting with one another, knowing one another, understanding that you're not alone, and we're a community. We're a live community. It's not just a Grindr that you meet people. I myself, I never used Grindr because I met my spouse before that.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
It depends. It's a whole story, but we have other episodes about that topic.
But I do think that we have a responsibility, both because each one of us has had his or her journey coming out of the closet, and we have a responsibility for ourselves, and also as people working in the tech industry that created a lot of tools that are very leading today, and to make our world better, also for ourselves, for the LGBT community.
What effect do you think that the things that you are doing in LGBTech, in your organization, what effect it has on other people who are working outside of the tech industry?
So we can answer that question on two levels. Let's talk about the direct and obvious level, right? Is that your question is completely valid, and it's a debate we had within our organization as well to expand our community beyond the borders of just tech. And we've actually got one or two companies who have included us in their process of inclusiveness, which are not in the tech industry. So it's an important expansion, which I think we've recognized. Another perspective of this, even though LGBTech and even any niche organization within our community, we got to remember that all of us have got friends, have got colleagues, have got children, siblings, parents, and not all of them are in the community, but they all know the work we're doing in the community. So keeping it insulated is incredibly difficult, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the broader community around the community can disseminate the work that we're trying to achieve.
We started in tech because it was the right place to start, because the tech industry is considered more open for LGBTs around the world. So we started in the tech industry, but we expanded above the tech industry in order to increase our impact, not only in the tech industry in Israel.
We gave an example in one of the Hebrew episodes that, for instance, Apple, which everyone knows, so they take their workers to their parades. For instance, it's not something that, for instance, my mother is a kindergarten. I cannot imagine any situation that lots of kindergarten teachers will go together to the parade, for instance. So this is one of the...
So many companies abroad are investing more resources in order to include their employees. We see a lot of companies abroad marching in the parade. I can tell you that my brother, who lives in Berkeley, his son is in the kindergarten, and all the kindergarten class was in the parade in Berkeley. So we started seeing more people from organizations or institutes taking part in the parade because they think it's the right thing to do, not because they're LGBTs, but because they believe in human rights. And they think that by taking part or participating, the message that they bring to either the kids or other employees, that no matter who you are, you're good. Whether you're LGBT or ethnic minority or women, come as you are. We'll accept you no matter who you are. So it's a message that has a lot of value for employees everywhere.
Just before we finish, one of the last questions I will have, although I have many more questions for both of you. It's a very interesting episode, and thank you for being here. So, as you just said, Shachar, about human rights and participating in the parades and the events related to the community, not necessarily for being an LGBT, but supporting human rights. So, my question for both of you is, do you think like that the LGBT community is the originator or the founder for other human rights activities?
It's a good question. LGBT
I
is
like the fact that you like my questions, I have to say.
it's a good one because it really relates to, so LGBTs are not, it's not the first revolution for human rights. I mean, women were much before that, and other populations of diversity were before LGBTs. But what is exceptional about LGBT is that in very short time, in considerably very short time, the impact and the revolution was very impactful. The path that LGBTs made in the last 50 years, 30 years is amazing. And other populations are both trying to understand what they can also do for their seek for human rights and equality. Of course, we're far from equality, especially in some parts of the LGBT community. As we mentioned, the trans community are 20 years behind gays at least. But it's something very exceptional that we need to acknowledge. And it's a whole discussion to understand why it was a revolution on steroids for the LGBT community compared to other populations that started much before the LGBT community.
Yeah, I think that's very valid points that Shachar's pointed out here. Is that there are plenty social rights movements long before LGBTech. We seem to be in the spotlight at the moment. From addition to other causes as well. Don't want to belittle any other cause of any person, but human rights is a broad category and LGBT as a catalyst for it. Let me just add that for a human rights activist and for a human being who has values in life, you don't need to understand. You don't need to understand how a gay person feels. You don't need to understand a trans person to accept that they got rights to be treated with dignity and equality. My personal hate in life is people telling me what treatments I need, whether I'm acceptable, what I think, what I feel, where you couldn't possibly know that. And I think the catalyst has been, you don't have to know that. If you think I'm a decent human being, that's all you really have to know. And to end the podcast, I give a story I always tell that many people have heard, so I apologize to those who've listened to previous podcasts. But if you...
People are not listening to our podcasts. We're only to
That's okay. If a person is trans, they can't concentrate on their life because it's not their life that they live in. So they're operating on 10% as a number. So when you employ them before they've transitioned, you're not getting a functional employee, but they're not prejudiced against. After they transition, you get an employee at 100%. That's 90% more productive, but yet that's the person that you're going to discriminate against. Remember what you would lose by prejudice. That's the catalyst that the LGBT brings to the human rights movement, is allowing people to be productive.
If I can add to that, being the promoting diversity and inclusion for LGBTs is foremost is for human rights. But if you look at the business world, it's not only human rights; it has also a lot of economic values that you need to acknowledge. Because if your employees are more satisfied and more productive, and they bring more insight, I mean, thinking out of the box and having different perspective has a lot of business values. So it's both because it's the right thing to do, human rights, and also because it really creates a lot of value for businesses.
I think that we can sum up that what is interesting about the community, the LGBT community, is first of all that we are everywhere in all kinds of aspects. And by including people for being who they are, or even for being who they are, can very benefit everyone, either from moral aspects or from economic aspects. And some parts of the podcast and the episodes they are historic, where we talk about the past. And I think that this episode is really interesting because we're now talking about inclusion in workplaces and inclusion of LGBT people and women and the trans community. And I think that these are really huge steps, because imagining the people who organized Stonewall riots only a few decades ago, I'm not sure that they could even imagine such situation. And I'm sure that this episode and with the stories which we just told, we can empower people and workers and managers and people in all around the world, in countries and in cities and in places that might remind Jerusalem, where we also find good surprises and workplaces where we could be who we are, and we see how everyone can benefit with it. So Bianca and Shachar, I want to thank you very, very much for participating in this episode.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you. Production of this episode came to reality thanks to the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Jerusalem. And also thanks to our volunteers, Alon Rosenblum, Ariel Skop, together with a student from the Tel Aviv University who's been volunteering in this podcast as part of an academic course about LGBT history, Oded Spitzer. This was another episode of Straight Friendly Global. You can find more episodes and listen to our podcast on your favorite listening app, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Echo Podcasts, Alexa Media Player, Google Podcasts, and so on.